All right, good morning, St. Matthew. By the rivers of Babylon, where we sat down, there we wept, when we remembered Zion, when the wicked carried us away in captivity, required of us a song. Now how shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight here this morning. Amen. You know, friends, I did not ever think I would preach on Psalm 137. Especially the last verse of this psalm, which is one of the most shockingly violent and disturbing images in the entire Bible. Written sometime between the years of 587 and 539 BC, when the Israelites were carried away in captivity from Jerusalem to Babylon. Now, this is not something we talked about in the polite Midwestern churches that I grew up in. Although I understand it's not unheard of in the black church tradition. The Boney M version, which we sang with the choir earlier, was based on an earlier version by a reggae group called the Melodians. Maybe you remember them. And it reinterprets these verses to fit the context of those being carried away from Africa in captivity and brought to the New World to be sold into slavery. Now, the reason I'm talking about this psalm today is that people are being carried away into captivity right now, right here in Chicago. I spent the past 3 weeks out on Long Island, and I followed the news about events in Chicago, and I had the impression that this planned occupation of the city by federal agents and the military had just been blown out of proportion. And then I came back to Chicago earlier this week, and I took part in an all-hands call for the Chicago area clergy of Methodist churches who have formed a rapid response network. And friends, I have to tell you that what we are seeing on the television and in the news represents only a tiny fraction of what's actually happening on the ground. I was shocked when I heard the voices of those folks who are on the ground, who are seeing literally thousands of ICE agents all over the city, rounding people up and taking them to, among other places, a facility in Broadview, Illinois, just about a half-hour drive west of here. That's why I've titled this sermon, By the Rivers of Broadview, a suburb bounded on the east by the Des Plaines River and on the south by the Salt Creek. This facility, friends, is under the complete control and management of the Department of Homeland Security, with absolutely no one allowed inside or even near the building. Protesters, even peaceful clergy, are being pepper sprayed and hit with rubber bullets. The Methodist pastors on the call spoke of the countless persons from their congregations being rounded up and disappeared. Maybe you've seen the videos of the apartment building in South Shore with helicopters and troops rappelling from the roof, all in the name of removing members of a gang. But it actually wasn't gang members that were targeted. It was everyone. Rounded up, no questions asked, and taken to secure facilities. Now you tell me, what happens when groups of people are held in captivity under the complete control and sanction of the government, who have complete impunity, secrecy, and silence? Total control and total silence has historically meant torture. Remember, friends, history repeats itself. Why do you think this administration is attacking the histories being taught in schools or national parks and museums, complaining they focus too much on how bad slavery was and not about how great America is? If we don't remember our history, it will continue to repeat itself. Remember the captives of the Middle Passages. Remember the captives of the numerous trails of tears, where the indigenous residents of the lands were disappeared so that others could take that land. Remember the captives in the death camps of the Second World War. Remember the captives in the Abu Ghraib detention facility in Iraq, or the captives in Guantanamo, all victims of torture, state-sanctioned torture. Now, just as this psalm moves from grief to rage, when we remember our grief can turn to rage, and that's only natural. But we can't stay forever in a state of rage. So how do we move from grief to rage to hope? The only way I know is through remembering and honoring those memories as sacred. Just as we remember the captivity, torture, and death of Jesus as a sacred memory. And we recount that sacred memory every time we have the sacrament of Holy Communion. Now, for the record, and I'm sorry to even have to say it, but it's never okay to harm children, or any person for that matter, as the psalmist prays for in the final verse of Psalm 137. But we live in a sick world where the spiritual forces of wickedness have significant sway and influence and control, and our words have a tendency to be taken out of context and wrongfully represented. Even the church has not been innocent of harming children, always in secrecy. But friends, the good news is that we have the power to remember what happened in the past and what is happening right now. And when we remember the captives of the past or the present, we also remember that Jesus is present and suffering right alongside them. Some of you may want to take action and get involved with the resistance. And if so, let me know, and I will plug you in to the Rapid Response Network. But everyone, whether we want to take risks or not, can remember and pray. Remember that this has happened and is continuing to happen right here in our local communities. If we don't remember, then what is being done in secrecy will remain in secrecy. We have to trust the words of Jesus, who said that everything done in darkness will be brought into the light. We have to believe that there will be accountability for those who are acting wickedly. And we have to maintain our faith that captivity, torture, and even death are not the end of the story. The captives in Babylon, at least those who survived, were eventually released, though it took about 40 years. The captives held in bondage in the American South were eventually released, though not without much suffering and bloodshed. Remember, as the Song of Mary in the first chapter of Luke proclaims, God sets the captives free. God brings down the mighty from their thrones and lifts up the lowly. God is with the oppressed, and so we too will stand with the oppressed, with the hope and the prayer that one day there will be no more captives, no more suffering, no more cruelty, but rather justice for the oppressed and the oppressor. So how shall we sing the Lord's song? Let us sing it together. Let us sing it loudly. Let us sing it with faith, hope, trust, and love, that grief, which turns to rage, can be turned to hope and compassion and an end to this suffering. May it be so. Amen.